Welcome aboard. Today we are headed out on a cruise around the San Francisco Bay. We'll voyage out under the Golden Gate Bridge, around famous Alcatraz Island, and get a unique seaside view of the beautiful city on the bay. From San Francisco to Alcatraz to the Golden Gate Bridge and beyond, we'll be covering a lot of territory, a lot of history, a lot of stories. San Francisco is a port city, a city with salt water in her veins. Take a good look around, for this is no ordinary view. Now, the first thing I want you to do is take a deep breath of that fresh breeze. But hold on tight. The water can get choppy, even on the calmest day. So be careful if you're walking around the deck. As we pull out of the dock, look out the windows and down into the water. You see some frisky sea lions. If you miss them now, we'll see some later as we return. If they are hiding today, you can always hear them.
Downstairs bar is now open for business. Your bartender today is
place to send the worst criminals of all.
Yeah, my name is Leon Whitey Thompson. My number was 1465, AC 1465.
Listen carefully now. You're about to hear from former inmates, guards, and residents of The Rock to tell you their stories themselves.
I was a man that had total hatred and envy. I hated anything that walked or crawled on this earth. And when you got a man like that in prison, you got to get rid of him. And that's what they did. They shipped me to Alcatraz.
These were hard men, kidnappers, bank robbers, killers, men so dangerous that when the first batch arrived by train in 1934, not one was allowed to step down onto free soil. They simply loaded the train cars, one by one, onto barges, and floated them out to the island with the inmates chained up inside. Rumor was that if a man died on Alcatraz, his corpse would leave the same way, stone cold death, but in chains. With men like these, you could never be too careful. The building you see on top of the hill was the inmate's new home, the Alcatraz cell house. One described it as a tomb of living souls. Some would stay for a year, others for 20 or 25 years or more. To get an idea of the accommodations inside, go ahead and reach your arms out as far as you can from side to side. That's how wide an Alcatraz cell is, 5 feet across. Now reach your hands up high above your head. That's how tall, and only a bit longer from end to end. The cell house might look huge from here, but it was never completely filled. No more than 300 inmates lived inside at any time. 300. They could all fit on this boat ride today. Notice the circular water tower. Alcatraz is surrounded by water, but on the island itself, not a drop. Fresh water had to come from San Francisco, and not by any pipeline. 2 or 3 times a week, a barge arrived, full of 180,000 gallons of fresh water. It was pumped up into that tank. The tall smokestack marks the Alcatraz powerhouse. One thing that couldn't be brought out here by boat was electricity, so they made their own. One young man was only 21 years old when he first climbed onto The Rock. His name was Frank Heaney, and he was a guard. In fact, the youngest guard ever to serve on Alcatraz.
I had a very difficult time. They really took advantage of my age. The old saying that misery loves company, they're very miserable, so they like to make you miserable too. They had no tailor-made cigarettes, they had no candy bars, chewing gum, soft drinks, radio, television, newspapers, rolls, or rehabilitation programs. They had none of that by being sent to Alcatraz.
Men sent to Alcatraz considered themselves the elite among convicts.
But on The Rock, I'm not trying to put a feather in my hat or not, but they had a lot of class.
You could say they were a higher caliber of criminals. They were more or less professional. People who were nail crops and banks and so forth. Some were in for murder. They were a cut above average, the average criminal.
Robert Strauss, Birdman, Al Capone, Mickey Cohen, Frankie Garbo, Machine Gun Kelly. They just another stupid fool like I was, and that's the way most of the other cons felt about, because everybody was the same on The Rock.
Nobody learned that faster than Alphonse Big Al Capone, Mr. Scarface himself. Capone ruled like a king in any other prison, but here on The Rock, he mopped floors just like anybody else. With no one to protect him, Capone was a sitting duck. The big man was roughed up, beaten, and even stabbed. But Capone had carried his real killer with him to Alcatraz. A case of untreated syphilis was eating his brain and slowly driving him insane. He ended up locked in the bug cage, the fenced-off section of the hospital for mental patients. Still the tough guy, Capone fought with his ward mate, not with guns or knives, but with bedpans. Full bedpans. Afterwards, the once mighty crime czar had to be washed off with a
see in front of us is the dock tower. It was manned 24 hours a day.
Open sa camera niya.
It had a large group of weapons, had a 30-06 rifle, 30 caliber rifle, tear gas gun, 38 revolver. Men were shot and killed from the tower.
One officer would sit up on the top of that tiny tower, 75 feet above the island, locked in for 8 hours at a time. Watching. Just watching. No matter what kind of weather.
Sometimes you thought you were in heaven. When the fog would come in, you could hardly see.
George Stephen Kinsey was an Alcatraz guard in the 50s.
I was in the dock tower the day that they closed the Golden Gate Bridge. They had over 100-mile-an-hour gales, and I'm on that dock tower, and that was swinging and swaying like Sandy Kay's music. The water in the commode was spinning around, the tower was shaking, and I said, my God, if this goes over, I'm going to end up in a bay locked up in this cage.
On the walls of the guards' barracks, you could still see writing from the Indian occupation of 1969 to 1971. Look for the words Indian Land and Indians Welcome. A group of 89 Native Americans claimed the island and held out here for 2 years. Historian John Martini is here to explain what happened.
They claimed Alcatraz under an old treaty that said that male members of the Great Sioux Nation could homestead unused excess federal property. The first time in nearly a century when Indians of all tribes had gathered together for a common purpose.
In the end, the Indians were forced off the island. They were probably the only inhabitants of Alcatraz ever to leave unwillingly. Up the hill, you can see a partially destroyed building with open, empty windows. This was once a luxurious Spanish mission-style mansion, home to the Alcatraz warden. It burned in a fire that broke out during the Indian occupation. All that is left is this battered shell. Looking at these cliffs passing by, you can get a close-up view of why Alcatraz is called the Rock. When the army first arrived, the island was so barren that there weren't even any plants. There wasn't any dirt for them to grow in. Soil had to be imported here from Angel Island before anything bloomed on the Rock. It didn't take long for someone to try to escape from Alcatraz. Just 2 years after the prison opened, guards saw a lone man struggling over a wire fence. They took aim, and he fell to his death into the bay. There's no definite proof that any prisoner ever escaped Alcatraz alive. But that didn't keep desperate men from trying. 36 of them in all.
You cannot take away from a man the thought that he wants his freedom.
I could see out the window at night time, and you could see kind of over by the Berkeley coastline there, and you can see all the lights over there.
There's mine. There's everything I want in my life, and it's there. It's a mile or a mile and a half away. And I can't get it.
That wide open area just past the cell house is the prison exercise yard. Once a week on Sunday, inmates were allowed out in the yard. For just 2 hours, life there could seem normal. They could sit in the sun, read, maybe play a game of softball with friends.
Occasionally, some guy would get exuberant and knock the ball over the wall. But if you knock the ball over the wall, you're out. It's not a home run, and you can't go to the other side to get it either.
That long, white two-story building was the prison industry.
There were a number of attempted escapes that started from that building. There was one incident where the inmates got to the top of the building. You see a small tower there. They were going to attack that tower. The officer spotted them, and he shot and killed one and wounded another, and the other was captured.
The whole top floor of the industry's building was a laundry. Alcatraz inmates washed uniforms for all the armed forces around the Bay Area. The laundry arrived on an army boat and was delivered by soldiers. That gave one very smart inmate an idea. Slowly and patiently, He began to collect bits and pieces of uniforms as they made their way through the laundry. And when I say patient, I mean it. It took him 10 years to do it, but he finally collected a complete Army uniform, dog tags and all. Armed with nothing more than a Texaco mat and a few dollars in change, he calmly strolled down to the dock and walked onto the boat with the rest of the soldiers. He made it as far as Angel Island. Alcatraz guards were there to meet him with a pair of handguns, and he quietly rowed the boat back to the rock. One guard captain said he kind of felt sorry for the guy. He should have won an award for his efforts. Today, names like Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud the Birdman are world famous. But other Alcatraz inmates were equally evil, though their names might be forgotten. Like Billy Cook. He murdered 12 people in cold blood.
Oh, Billy Cook. I never liked him. He spit in my face once.
George Stevenson.
He killed a mother and a father and 3 children and threw them down a well. He was given 300 years from Alcatraz. And talk about a psychopath, he was one. Because he killed a California Highway Patrol officer, they gave him the death penalty. He was executed in San Quentin. So I took a busman's holiday and went over there and watched him get executed. He was an animal as far as I was concerned.
Think about your first day on the job, or maybe your first day at a new school. I'll bet it was nothing like George DiVincenzi's first day on Alcatraz.
I reported 9 o'clock Monday morning, and I was told to go to the barbershop. I was a barbershop officer. And this one inmate, the barber, proceeded to give his first customer a haircut. And as he was giving him a haircut, they were conversing in low tones very intimately. I could not quite figure what was going on. And as the haircut proceeded, the conversation got more intense. Next thing you know, the customer who was getting the haircut got up out of the chair. The barber lunged at him with these big barber shears about 10 inches long. He got him in the neck, in the heart, in the throat. Down he went, blood flying all over the place. And me, like a damn fool, blowing the whistle, I jumped in trying to separate him. Well, 3 of us spun around, knocked the barber chair over, knocked another cabinet over, and he kept hitting him with these scissors. Of course, he was dead within less than a minute. Needless to say, that was the end of the shears in the barber shop. They went to electric clippers after that. That was my introduction to Alcatraz, my first day.
It was said that the cold waters and deadly currents of the bay made Alcatraz virtually escape-proof. Prisoners might break out of the cell block, but getting off the island was an almost impossible challenge. In 1958, 2 men decided it was worth the risk to brave the freezing bay water. The idea of it sends chills right up my spine. Why, imagine seeing prisoners swimming towards our boat right now. You see, in this story, 2 men made it out of the cell block and into the water. One inmate was captured and taken back to his cell. He lived to tell the story of his attempt. His partner in the escape wasn't so lucky.
I recall getting in that water, and it was like a shock. It was just like a, how should you say, suddenly pressed into an icebox. We were going to hide among rocks until nightfall, and then so on. But I got caught up with about 15 minutes before dark. On every escape, when a man's missing, the Coast Guard comes out and goes around, and the prison boat circles. They both circle, looking all along the shoreline for anybody. I had originally planned to be underwater with the snorkel. I lost what I needed. I lost the snorkel to keep myself underwater. And for that reason, I think I failed on it.
If he had been able to hide until dark, he would have had a long, cold swim ahead of him.
And I was more or less hoping to go to Point Richmond, which is about, I think, 8 miles or so. And I had a plastic bag to keep myself afloat. The only thing I was concerned, how long could you stand it in that water without being unconscious? You need Navy heavy underwear. And I guess that's
damn well. On the menu, there was porterhouse steak with snowflake potatoes, southern fried chicken, or grilled fillet of perch with a lemon blue and buttered asparagus. Full yet? Better leave room for dessert. If inmates didn't eat everything on their plate, they got no food the next day. There was strawberry ice cream, apple